everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome to 2023 From Jikji to Gutenberg Forum's overall discussion. So, Mr. Randy Silverman will be our moderator tonight or this morning. Depends on your time zone. And it's going to be very casual discussion. So, if you have any questions, if you'd like to share your thoughts, please raise your hand and, anytime you want. And we have interpretation with us today, two interpreters, Bora Lee and Suhyun Park. Depending on the language that you would like to use, you can choose on the bottom of the this whole Zoom screen. Click the globe-shaped icon at the bottom and select your language to enable the interpretation mode. And with no further ado, I'll give the floor to Mr. Randy Silverman, our moderator tonight.
Thank you so much, Angelica. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Randy Silverman, the head of preservation at the University of Utah's J. Willard Marriott Library and the co-chair of the From Jikji to Gutenberg Project. I'd like to acknowledge and thank our host this evening, or this morning, depending where you are, the creator of the From Jikji to Gutenberg Forum, the UNESCO International Center for Documentary Heritage, or ICDH, which was established in 2020 through an agreement between UNESCO and the government of the Republic of Korea. UNESCO ICDH supports the preservation of documentary heritage internationally and works to ensure
자료 유산이
three presenters for the forum, who are, two of them are here tonight to discuss their presentations and answer questions. Include Tim Barrett, who's a specialist in the history, technique, and aesthetics of hand paper making, and was director of the University of Iowa Center for the Book, where he taught paper making for many years. His primary research interests have been Japanese and early European paper making, and more recently, early Korean paper making. Tim has utilized non-destructive instrumentation during the analysis of historical papers and hands-on experimental paper making to help answer questions about the quality and character of early papers. Ed Steinman received a PhD from the University of Amsterdam and is a fellow of the Royal Historical Society in London. He's a professional printmaker and an independent scholar of historical printmaking processes, specializing in manual intaglio printmaking techniques. He's lectured and published widely on the subject, including his seminal award-winning book, Engraving and Etching 1400 through 2000, A History of the Development of Manual Intaglio Printmaking Processes, which was published in 2012. Together with Elizabeth Savage, he co-edited their award-winning Printing Color 1400 to 1700, History, Techniques, Functions, and Receptions, which was published in 2015. His curatorial activities include exhibitions on medieval prints, early modern color prints, and Rembrandt's etchings on Japanese paper. And Stan Nelson, who we hope will join us shortly, is a museum specialist emeritus, having worked in the graphic arts collection at the Museum of American History, the Smithsonian Institution, for 31 years. All aspects of printing history are of interest to him, but he's made type founding a specialty. Stan is one of a handful of active punch cutters and has made many of his tools, especially hand molds, for casting type. So with that, I would like to offer the floor to either Tim or Ad. Who would like to kick this off?
Please, Tim, you first.
Well, I have
I really enjoyed everyone's presentation and reading about all these different developments that were happening. I have a very general question that I'm very ignorant about. It has to do with the history of the world between, say, 1200 and 1400. It seems to me there were all kinds of fascinating developments going on in printmaking and papermaking, as well as in papermaking. And I'm just wondering if there was a burst of exchange or travel or something that might explain. I'm not trying to get at any possible connection between Korea and Europe at this time, but I'm just curious to know. I might throw this back at Odd, actually, because there were a lot of fascinating innovations in printmaking that occurred. And I wonder if, from your perspective, was anything special happening just prior to, say, the printing of the Jikji and the printing of the Gutenberg Bible in the world of printmaking? I mean, was this an especially rich historical period around the world? That's my question.
Well, if you look at Europe, there is, say, what is it, 13th century? A kind of proto-industrial revolution. So you see some inventions coming up. You also see the first stages of environmental pollution. There's written, there's published about it. And then comes the Black Death, coming from the West Asian steppes, and then, well, spreading all over Europe, which lowers all the activities, and it takes a while before things get active again. But then what you also see is a number of, call it invasions or migrations, coming from Asia in the 13th century for early 14th century.
13세기 그리고 14세기 초까지 이런 움직임이 있었고요. 제가 보기에는 이러한 활동과 사건들이 정보 교환으로 이루어졌다고 생각합니다. 아시아와 유럽 그리고 북아프리카, 특히 이집트 사이에 어떤 교류가 일어났던 거죠. 어떤 육상 조역료가 남아시아에서 유럽까지로
into Europe and through Europe to the north of Europe, to Scandinavia. So look at, for example, the Amber Route coming from the Baltic area, going straight south into the Byzantine Empire. And then it connects with other trade routes, going east and going further south and going west. So yeah, people travel. People don't stand still. And it's people traveling, it's ideas traveling, and you see that continuously.
And what can we say about Korea during this same period? Was anything special happening in Korea between 1200 and 1400 in terms of innovations and travel? And I'm being completely ignorant here, but curious.
I'm also ignorant. If one of the Korean participants could shed some light on this.
Could you repeat the last question, please?
Well, I'm just curious to know if the period between 1200 and 1400 was an especially rich time in Korea in terms of new ideas, new inventions, and exchange with other countries.
I can't speak for anything else, any other fields, but regarding the cultural exchange and printing in Korea at that time, with the fervor of Buddhism spread of wanting to spread the words, they started having wood block printing and printing of the various Buddhist books, and that might have been the impetus to getting more documents printed and made available to the people of Korea. So I think there was a lot of activity during that period in Korea, and so that's what a little I can add.
Yeah, Ad, I think it was nice to hear you say people traveled, people got around. People were curious then. They wanted, of course, they were business people. They wanted to make money. They wanted to provide for their families, but they were also perhaps a lot more mobile than we think they were. And so there may have been a lot more exchange of ideas than have been documented. I mean, you can imagine what it was like traveling across several continents and arriving in another city that you'd never been to before. It was like going to Mars or something, or going under the ocean. It must have been incredibly exciting. And people love that kind of stimulation,
Yeah. I think it may even be the opposite, that people were so used to traveling. Of course, a lot slower than we would travel by train or by plane. But they did move continuously. And so nomadic tribes, wandering tribes, were, in my eyes, quite common, especially because there were no larger cities. Well, there was Byzantium, and there were some Chinese and Indian cities and something in Egypt, but really large cities in Europe, no. No, Rome was small. Byzantium, Byzantium. But for the rest, no, small towns on top of hills, and that's about it. And the rest moved about.
Yep.
Hi, Stan.
Stan is here.
Yeah. Finally awake. Finally awake.
Hi, Gary.
Hi. Can I follow with Ad's comment? Yes, Ad as a key word, he's used the word proto-industrial revolution. And I'd like to ask both Stan and Ad to follow this track, because one of the characteristics, as we know, is interchangeability of parts. That is, if you will, a trigger to many industrial aftermaths or even industrialization. And I believe that the interchangeable parts can relate to the cast type.
Absolutely.
Because of the 6-gauge surfaces that were required, as you pointed out, Stan, that were required to align the lockup of all the type. But I've noticed just one absence here of clarity in industrialization, and that will bring back to Ad as well the issue of precision and mechanization required to print.
Maybe I can partially answer Gary's question. So if what I call, or what others call, a proto-industrial revolution, you can look at some of the manuscripts from the 12th century.
11세기의 어떤 기록물을 보면 어떤 굉장히 정밀하고 정교한 기법이 드러납니다. 이때 시계도 발명되었고 작은 소규모 기계도 처음으로 등장을 했고요. 그리고 큰 네, 에코가 있는 것 같은데요. 지금 오디오 문제가 있네요. 네, 제가 중간에 인터넷 연결이 끊겨서 잠깐 튕겼다 나왔는데 다시 그 프로토 산업혁명, 초기 산업혁명이라는
and refinement required to print on both sides of paper without distorting it. It seems to me that that is a little bit unexplored, as if it were presumed, because of course the Western manuscript was utilizing both sides. But nevertheless, with the advent of what we'll call relief impression onto a substrate, for example, you couldn't print on even a single side of papyrus with the metal type. You could with parchment, and of course that was used. But the idea of duplexing onto paper may be another crucial aspect of
yeah.
What's going on?
Okay. Shall I again try to formulate a first answer to Gary's question? So the printing on one side or both sides of paper is, even with the thinnest papers, is possible, but you also have to look at the ink recipes. So if you have an ink which strongly bleeds through the paper, you can print on only one side. You see the same thing with say Korean or any other or most other Oriental papers. You can write on one side of a very thin sheet of paper, and it takes double layered paper or paper with fillers on which you can write on both sides or paint on both sides. The same with printing. European style, if you print with a water-based or an oil-based ink, and either of the ink say flows or bleeds through the paper, then you can print only one side. Now the virtue of Gutenberg's printing ink was that it is a fast drying ink. It dried probably within 20 seconds after offsetting ink from the type onto the paper, so it does not bleed through. There is a dryer in the ink. If you look at the parallel development of the printing of block books, that is printing texts and images from cut blocks, say East Asian style, they always used a water-based ink. And block books, what is the majority of block books, is printed on one side only. If you want to print on both sides, you either have to have a faster drying ink or less bleeding ink or a thicker kind of paper. So ink research, yes, plays a role in
Absolutely.
our project.
Ed, you've probably talked about the fact that the boiling of the oil, sufficient boiling, is so essential because otherwise it's too oily.
Yep. Yeah, but it's boiling of the oil which starts the polymerization process, but also you need a dryer, which oh, what's the word for that? Catalyzes? Is that the English word? Which speeds up the drying. It has two functions. It's a drying of the oil varnish. If you leave a thin layer of oil varnish on a glass plate, it takes, say, 4 or 5 days before it's dry to the touch. You can rub it a little. But it's also the pigment, the black pigment in the ink, which retards the drying. So all black inks for relief printing from Gutenberg's days are made using a lampblack. So that's nearly pure carbon. Nearly pure carbon has the very awkward property of retarding the drying. So that is the oxidation and polymerization of oil varnish up to, say, 2 years. So that knowledge must be there before you can even think of creating a very nice black relief printing ink.
I have a question. I mean, to Tim, sorry.
No, good. Ask it. Good.
Okay. First of all, it's nice to see you again online since last April at the Library Congress. Okay, as a Korean traditional paper researcher, I'd like to thank Tim for
전통 그 종이 전문 연구자로서 이 종이 쪽에 관심을 가져주셔서 감사합니다. 아까 1500년대 이전에 만들어진 종이는 젤라틴 농도가 조금
in color and higher in calcium than the paper made later than 1500. And I think is that the thicker paper related to the high gelatin content? And is there any downside of gelatin-sized paper? For example, does it brittle or breaks? The second question is, paper made before 1500 was said to be has high calcium contents, right? And is it related to the bleaching process? You said for the rag has some color, so it has to be removed to be white. And to have more whitening process, it gets the whiter then. And you said in the process, they use the alkaline lye made from wood ash. And is that in Korea, we use wood ash to make, to pre-treat the wood, bark, we call it 당나무, is the main source of hanji. And you also use the wood ash for, the alkaline lye made from wood ash. And is that the function of the lye for the whitening? That was the second question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's several very interesting questions there. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure I can remember them all, but I think one of your first questions had to do with the thickness of paper made prior to 1500 and whether that was associated with gelatin sizing. In particular, I think there are a lot of indications that the 15th century European paper makers and even before were trying to emulate the look and feel of parchment, which was a quite substantial material. So I think the thicker, they were starting from square one, or at least in 1300 or the late 1200s, to try to establish a market in Europe, and their only model, the precursor material was parchment. So paper of the period needed to be fairly substantial, or at least look and feel that way. And one way to do that is to make it a little more sumptuous and thicker. Another way is to gelatin size it, which completely changes, as you know, its mechanical properties and its absorbance of aqueous media. So the two kind of go together. I think the downside to gelatin sizing for the printers was that it could interfere with effective printing. It was easier to print on slack-sized or unsized paper, or paper that was dampened. So it could complicate matters for the printers, and it's one of the reasons I think we see a decline in gelatin concentration over the centuries. The business of calcium and lye, well, let's take the calcium first. I think calcium may have actually been added in the form of chalk to help lighten the color of the finished papers to make it brighter. Lime was certainly used in some steps in pulp preparation because, as you know, it helps swell the cellulose and increases the effectiveness of beating. And the alkalis used in light bleaching or sun bleaching of linen, I think the use of the alkali there was different, of course, because they weren't really cooking. They already had a raw material that was 100% cellulose in the rags. So there was no need to remove non-cellulosic waxes and gums and so on. So I think it's true that wood ash lye played a role in both historical Korean papermaking and in historical European papermaking, but the uses, the actual applications were different. Wood ashes have always been a great way to generate an alkaline solution if you needed it. So it was used in making soaps and all kinds of other things as well.
They said especially wood ash contain the ingredient contents, the calcium occupy about 25% of it. So it's very high content in it. So it may, it works that way, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, it could be one of the other sources for calcium in these papers. That's true.
About calcium, what about natural water sources with high calcium?
Absolutely. Yes. Yep.
Was that a choice from the beginning, you think?
Well, I've had people tell me that some of the more mountainous areas, you're putting up a paper mill, you need to have a supply of water coming downhill as a source of power. And I've had some people tell me that you can, using satellite imagery, pinpoint locations of dolomite, which is a combination of calcium and magnesium carbonate in mountainous areas in Europe that may well have been associated with papermaking locations. So it's certainly true in direct response to your question that cellulose fiber tends to absorb whatever metals are dissolved in the water during papermaking. And if there's iron there, that's not a good thing. If there's calcium and magnesium there, it's a good thing. So,
can I interject for a moment?
Sure.
I've been very curious about this too. And I wonder also how much calcium is taken up by the plants themselves from the earth they're grown in. I think of this in two parts. One is anyone who has tried to grow tomatoes knows the importance of having the right calcium levels in your soil. Otherwise, your tomatoes rot on the vine. But the other is Uwe and Minhal, when they were scanning some of the Korean documents, there were fibers in the paper that were sort of unbeaten parts of the plant that just hadn't been beaten as much as some of the other areas in the paper. And those had higher calcium concentrations. So that's also something for people to think about, but not something I've looked into, like the calcium levels of the fibers before and after paper making.
I have seen, I think, I don't know how much calcium they take up, the plants, but in wood ash, the range is quite big, but they said in wood ash, 7 to 33% is composed of calcium. So there's some variation, but it still is high content, I think.
Jennifer, I have a question for you, because one of the things that clearly the paper specialists on the team have been wrestling with, kind of at Randy's request, that is to say, OQ and Sukrat and I, we've been asking ourselves, what evidence does the paper have to give to this conversation? What role can it actually play? And there's no question that the elemental analysis of the paper, or the elemental concentrations in the paper, can be subtracted from the combination analysis of ink and paper to arrive at, hopefully, some elemental analysis of the ink or the residual metals from the type itself. Very exciting territory. But other than that, as I mentioned in my talk, I think the quality of the paper is something that we could look at. But my question for you is, do you think that the science of non-destructive elemental analysis of a material like paper will ever get to the point where we can distinguish papers as coming from the same area in Europe, or that the paper in the Jikji, I don't mean anytime soon, but down the road, that the paper in the Jikji publication likely came from such and such a location in Korea? I mean, is the science moving along so that some very refined elemental analyses are going to be possible non-destructively?
So I think the science, like the ability to detect levels like that, is probably already there. What I'm concerned about is that there are too many potential sources and not enough possible elements.
I guess I was just wondering if, for example, the water in a certain region of Korea has a really weird combination of three really strange distinctive ratio between three certain elements that just don't show up anyplace else and become kind of a fingerprint for the origin of that paper. But I'm excited to hear that you feel like the science is pretty darn close to being able to do that. Now, I agree that there's a lot of confounds.
Yeah, and so I think if you had sort of some fluke situations like that, where you might find one area that's kind of weird. What I don't think is that you'll necessarily find a different fingerprint for every region, because there's so many different. Because I think each type of fiber would take up the local area's elements differently, and then the water they were processed in would also affect things. But I'm also somewhat confident in saying this because there's been a paper out recently that looked at some of this, not with papyrus. But I haven't read it yet. So now now you're making me think, okay, I have to go and read that, and then I'll forward it on to you as well. So
okay, great. Good.
May I share some experience? So this is a question that say in my area, my field, is going on already for about 20-25 years. The question is repeated again and again. Can we, if you find particular elements or a combination of elements, does that relate to a particular source, a particular mine, for example, if you're looking at metals? And if the elemental ratios are rather coarse, then you can, for example, distinguish between copper from Hungarian mines and copper from Swedish mines. However, also in my personal experience, when you walk through a mine where they mine metals or salts, you walk 2 steps and you already see different colorations on the walls of the mine. So that means if you dig a little further, you get some kind of salt which has a slightly different proportion of elements. So that does not work. Then my other experience is that so we were working on Rembrandt's etchings printed on Japanese paper in 2015. And the Japanese team had sampled a number of Rembrandt's etchings on Japanese paper in Amsterdam in the Rijksmuseum. They scanned it in the SEMIDX, and they found, in particular Gampi papers, fillers which showed the use of particular clays. The next step would be to analyze where the clay pits for these clays were. And it seemed to point to Fukuyo, which is on the say west coast of Japanese main island. But then the money ran out and research stopped. So I gathered what material we had at that point, and I summarized it, and it's on my website. You can download it there. You can see some photographs with technical examinations and the results and the clays they found. So the next step would be, okay, we find this kind of material, where are the clay pits? So it is possible.
And I just barge in, completely different angle. Pharmaceutical industry at the moment uses different quality papers to make it absolutely sure that they can prove that packaging is from their company. So at the moment, they check the quality of paper and cardboard to prove that the paper comes from their factory.
Mm-hmm.
And they can, and at the moment it's going so far that different batches, basically sequences of packaging for a few thousand or a few 100,000 boxes, can be distinguished through the paper quality. So to answer Jennifer's question, yes, it's absolutely used at the moment, but in a very different field. I'm not sure if Gutenberg would have been happy with this, but it's used in the pharmaceutical industry.
일단 그 제약 업계에서 제약 산업에서 이런 식으로 어떤 회사 사이에서 구분을 하는데요. 혹시 어떤 퀄리티, 어떤 특징으로 구분을 하나요? 섬유, 특이한 섬유, 굉장히 구체적인 어떤 섬유를 판지와 종이에 활용을 해서 어떤 회사 사이에서 구분을 하는 거죠. 그 제약 회사에서 이렇게 하는 건데요. 어떤 약통 안에 들어있는 종이 같은 것도 다르게 합니다. 사실 화폐를 저희가 인쇄할 때도 화폐 사이에서 구분을 하기 위해, 그리고 복제가 어렵기 위해 섬유 종류를 다르게 쓴다든지 아니면 종이의 퀄리티를 다르게 가져간다는 게가 굉장히 흔한 관행이죠. 저도 그래서
to observe the materiality of these ancient materials, because some of them there's very little historical information to go on. That what we have is the evidence in front of us that survived. And I think in each of your papers there was discussions along these lines, but specifically, Tim, at one point you talked about observing the differences between papers under reflected light as in contrast to transmitted light. But the question is basically for all three of you: what kinds of observations do you think that are possible at this point from what we are starting to learn? Can you speak to some of the things that we might be able to find evidence for that we don't currently, that are information that's not currently in the literature as, quote, the history of printing or history of paper or history of type?
Well, I don't know how far along this project has gotten, but boy, oh boy, I'll tell you, if there is elemental evidence left in a printed text from the type, that is huge as far as I know. I mean, there have been ink analyses, but the notion that there's some kind of metal coming off of the type in the printing, if we can show that that's happening and can be detected, that is huge.
Yeah. It's been hypothesized that the alloy that they were using was largely tin and lead and very little other metal like antimony. I don't know how valid that hypothesis is, but if that is true, it would be more wearing, it would wear more readily if it were largely lead and tin. The antimony, of course, making it harder and less liable to wear. I think the source of that idea is that the early types seem to wear, and there's evidence, if I remember, of them recasting as they went along. So if that's the case, it makes sense. Antimony is a curious metal and troublesome to make, to prepare. It's a subject for some long discussion. The Moxon describes its preparation. Fournier does a better job. But at the core of it all, tin and lead were used in making stained glass windows. It's been used as solder. So that alloy is pretty well understood.
Hi, Oak Park.
Yes. Could I ask Stan in particular, what about the mechanism of the
What are you doing there, Gary?
What about the mechanism of the inking balls picking up? Because that's a very abrasive action of inking the type.
Well, I've had a lot of experience with that, and in my youth, I even prepared skins from the raw hide, and it's fairly soft and flexible. In fact, when ink balls work properly, they're very flexible and very smooth. And the ink itself is a kind of a lubricant. So I don't think the ink balls were, and also the ink balls are applied in a vertical fashion. So they're tapping downward onto the type. You shouldn't be scuffing, otherwise you're scraping the ink off on the edges of the type. So there's this very handy way that they would use to apply the ink. Everything that touches the type is to some degree abrasive, but not in a significant fashion. The paper is far more abrasive to the type. Even dampened, it's going to be more than the ink balls.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Park has a question.
This being my first participation in this forum, and I don't know the scope of this talk, and I'm almost hesitant to speak up with anything at this point. But I just wanted to bring up something, since we're talking about ink and paper and metal type and other type of printing. Maybe you're aware that there's a challenger. The challenge to the Jikji being the first ever material document that has been printed with movable metal type. And I'm almost hesitant to bring this up today because I don't know the scope of this meeting. But that challenger is the Song of Enchantment. 남명천화상송중도가. It's the Buddhist document that has been produced in 5 different versions, and there's a theory that is being put out and to be discussed, that the first one that was printed, that was presumably printed in 1239, And all these, there are 5 versions of this 증도가, 남용 증도가 in short. But one of them, called 공인본, there's a theory or proof that was printed using metal type printing, not wood block printing. It's all the other versions. And what is being presented is using the graphic analysis app. The person has analyzed how the ink falls off of the paper, not like in wood block printing where it's all pressed in and it's all solid looking. And this one particular version has characters coming off of the paper, like as if the ink has flown off of it, off the metal printing. And there's an elaborate explanation and analysis of that. And I don't know if you have heard of it or if you've seen it and examined it. I know Ms. No was there in Korea when this was presented in June of this year at the conference. So I just wanted to find out if you're thinking about that or even heard of it.
Could I address that? Is that I'd like to loop Jennifer in. Are you still on the call, Jennifer?
Yeah, her audio is put on.
Okay, well, so one of the points of research that's been going on has to do with actually using X-ray fluorescence to examine the residue, the printed page, and the evidence is very clear that the difference between a wood block and a piece printed from metal type has a very different chemical makeup. And the surprising part, as Tim alluded to, is that it contains far more metal than we would have expected, than anyone thought was possible, significantly more. So the question at this point has not been, I think, addressed with using scientific analyses that are techniques that are possible today. And when I tried to press the person asking or presenting this idea, he has contacted me several times by email, but I would love to be able to include an example of that book for examination. And I received an answer that did not open a door. I have no idea what the obstacles may be, but this could be tested. This is easily discerned today. Okay. Jennifer, do you want to comment about that? Maybe she's not there.
I'll Dr. Park respond first, and then.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm surprised that you ran into that problem, because I think they're very willing to, the Buddhist monk who holds that document is very willing and eager to share what he has to be analyzed and to be brought into the mix of discussion. And great. I went to see it while I was in Korea, and I'm not a print expert. I'm a librarian, bibliographer, but never into printing per se. But I could see that the same character being presented in slightly different rendition from page to page, and I could almost see what they're talking about. So I'm sure if you want me to, I could talk to them and give you an opportunity to go see it. Seeing is believing, so.
I would ask you to ask the question differently. We're scheduling a research experiment at Stanford University. We don't have a date yet, but we've made application. Probably the date will be between March and May, possibly June. But this coming, 2004 March to June, we would love to have that book as part of the experiment. We would absolutely love to examine it under X-ray fluorescence. Jennifer, what would you ask?
I'm not familiar with, I know the image analysis work that you're talking about. That's just not an area of expertise for me, unlike XRF for some of these other things. But yeah, I think to really prove the point, I think you would want to have in general, when you're making a scientific claim, you want to have positive proof, not only from one method, but from 2 or 3 methods that are coming in a completely different scientific angle to sort of really confirm what you're seeing. So, it's not just a fluke going on with one method that seems positive. And that makes it a lot easier for people to really take things on board.
Right, I understand. But you need that document to be brought over to Stanford?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it would need a lot of insurance.
Well, it would probably, yes. We're coping with the same problem currently, that we're going to move. These things are still being worked out, but in theory, we're going to be able to scan a Korean book printed before Gutenberg printed from Princeton and from the Lilly Library in Indiana, and we have to move them both to Stanford. Moving the other piece internationally would create other problems, I'm sure, but it's certainly an invitation to lay the question to rest. We would be willing to take this piece into the experiment hands down. We're also going to be scanning some pre-Gutenberg metal type that belongs to the Newberry Library in Chicago. So this experiment is set up specifically to be able to look at more Korean early material than we have in the past. It's our 3rd experiment, but it would be fabulous to have that book, and then we could see what the results are. I think it would be very interesting to have everyone be surprised. Whichever way you would be surprised, I'd be delighted to see people ask the question. Part of this whole process, let me just state this, part of all of this is about the fact that what we would love to do is encourage greater interaction, create an opportunity worldwide for people to get together and try and think through questions that have not been asked due to separation of cultures or differences in language. There are reasons that people don't understand this, but we think we should be getting past all that there are methods that could be used that are universally acceptable, I think, for answering these kind of questions. And mostly that we want accuracy in our discussions where people have real knowledge to base their assumptions on. As you're well aware, in America and a lot in Europe, there's been very little recognition that there was printing from metal type before Gutenberg. And so the premise is it's about time we learned that as a general, generally, more broadly. And this project will culminate in an exhibit, a set of exhibitions in 2027 when Jikji happens to be 650 years old. But it's a good excuse as any for Americans and Europeans to take on board this notion that it was a worldwide push for to extend to share information, valuable information. You know, the text you're speaking about is Buddhist. The Jikji is Buddhist. The Gutenberg Bible is you know, Western Bible. I mean, these are very important ideas that when people spread them out, it had a big impact. And so we'd love to expand what we're doing this way.
I'll try to do what I can to open their minds about bringing it over to Stanford. Somehow, I live about 10 minutes away from the Huntington Library, where a copy of Gutenberg Bible is housed. I was just there 2 days ago to show one of the guests who wanted to see it. And even the curator of the Huntington Library didn't know Korea was ahead of Gutenberg.
You'll be happy to know that the Huntington is one of the places that will join us in the exhibition. So the institution will learn more about it, certainly in the next few years, I suspect, because it is truly a blind spot for all of us, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I will let you know what I get out of it.
Dr. Oak raised his hand, so.
예, 저는 한국학중앙연구원에 있는 오경정이라고 합니다. 예, 방금 그 말씀하신 그 박혜옥 선생님 말씀과 관련한 거 하나 하고 관련해서 말씀을 드리고 싶은데요. 그 정도가 그 인쇄물이 직지보다 빠른 게 있다고 하는 그 주장은 1919년, 20년 이때부터 이미 이야기가 나왔습니다. 그래서 학술대회를 문화재청에서 주관해서 한 적이 있습니다. 하고 거기에 제가 토론을 했습니다. 근데 그분이 발표한 건 아니고 그 앞에 분, 그 다른 분이 먼저 발표를 했는데
여러분이 그 얘기가 있다.
예.
70년대 제 지도 교수님이 손보기 교수님이었거든요, 연대에서. 그래서 청 교수님도 그렇게 쓰시고 했던 건데.
예. 그래서 이미 그 80년대 중반부터 그걸 주장하신 분이 있었는데, 그 결론적으로 말씀드리면 그 자료는 목판 인쇄물의 후쇄본, 그러니까 목판이 굉장히 오랫동안 닳아서 다시 인쇄를 해서 그 위에 덧칠을 약간씩 가미한 것인데요. 저는 그 자료를 목판본의 후쇄본으로 보았습니다. 근데 이제 이 선생님은 새로 지금 이야기하시는 분은 디지털 이미지를 계속 스캔을 해가지고 그 이미지를 가지고 분석을 해보니까 이게 다르게 나왔다. 그러니까 기존의 금속활자본과 다르다. 기존의 목판본과 다르다. 이렇게 해서 금속활자본이라는 이야기를 하신 거거든요. 그래서 그 부분은 제니퍼 선생님 말씀도 굉장히 일리가 있는 말씀입니다. 다른 방식, 아주 다른 방식으로도 얼마든지 분석을 해서 이야기를 해야 한다고 생각합니다. 물론 제가 기회가 된다면 그 부분에 대해서 좀 더 반박할 수 있는 뭐 글이라든지 발표라든지 이런 걸 해야 될 것 같습니다.
So I am not I'm not married to this idea that there's a challenger who merits a closer look, but at least we need to talk about it. I think that the person that Dr. Oak mentioned, he's not getting credibility. He's not or historian, whatever. He's an engineer, and he developed this program that analyzes graphic image, and that's where he's coming from. So he hasn't been given a good listening to of his allegation. So that's why I'm bringing it up to you, because this I think is a great forum to really look into it with open eye, and whatever is true, I mean, it needs to be proven, and for the benefit, for the good of the humanity. So I will try to do what I can, and have the material brought over with more scrutiny, with open mind. I will. I try my best.
Thank you.
그리고 아까 첫 부분에 그 말씀하신 그 어떤 인쇄술과 관련지어서 어떤 획기적인 계기가 있었는가? 예를 들어 저 서유럽 쪽에서 산업혁명이 있듯이 그 첫 번째 선생님께서 질문을 하셨지 않습니까? 그거에 대해서 한국에서는 어떤 일이 있었는가 하는 부분은 제가 아는 범위 내에서 말씀을 드리자면 그 고려대장경이라는 큰 인쇄 사업이 있었습니다. 물론 그 배경에는 몽골의 침입이 있었죠. 그러니까 13세기, 그러니까 1200년대, 1300년대 그 시기에 중요한 그 정치적인 어떤 큰 사건들이 있었고, 그와 관련해서 고려대장경이라는 그 큰 대규모 인쇄 사업이 벌어졌죠. 그 과정에서 이제 일이 일어난 것이 아닌가. 저는 큰 사건이라면 그렇게 있다고 봅니다.
네. So can I ask a question? Just on the side, are you meeting regularly? Is this group meeting regularly, or is this a follow-up to day 1, day 2, day 3 of the presentation, and it's you're wrapping it up through this Zoom meeting?
Well, for this overall discussion that we are having right now, it follows up with the From Jikji to Gutenberg Forum, which, as you mentioned, goes from day 1 to day 3. But the team, the whole project team, we do meet well, I can't say regular basis, but we have if there's an issue that we would like to talk about, if there's some discussion we would like to have, we share our thoughts and knowledge through email and through meetings like this. And time to time, we do have small, more like I can't say conference, but seminar kind of meeting. And we had a big general scholarly colloquium at the Library of Congress in April this year. And we had more than 30 scholars all over the world. They're in the team, sharing their knowledge and the expertise and thoughts on the topics. That's a very broad topic, not just the Gutenberg or Jikji, but the whole printing history. And as we are doing right now, of course, including the paper making, ink making, type making, etc. So yes, this time it's about the topic of the forum, but we never have limits to our discussion or talk. We're a very open to all kinds of discussion. Is that right, Randy?
I'm muted. Yes, that's exactly right. We're going toward the culmination of the project is to create a scholarly publication that will be an exhibition catalog and an exhibition that we're hoping to roll out into the Huntington is one of the locations they've agreed to do it, but we'd like it to be in smaller institutions so that the saturation is much greater, so that the common person on the street would be able to know something about this topic. We all have found that we're very interested in knowing something about each other's specialty because we don't know. And so this has been eye-opening for each one of us. It's been an exciting thing. But I can tell you belong to this group. You should send me an email when this is over, and we should talk about how you might participate, and we can loop you in.
It'll be an honor. I know very little about printing, as I said before, but one of the papers that I wrote and got published several years ago is about the Mugu Jonggang Taranigyeong, and the scroll, the mini scroll Taranigyeong that was published printed in the Shilla period. So that got me into this printing area. And I'm getting more and more interested in it. So I'll be happy to, and I'll be honored.
You have my email?
No.
I'll put it in the chat. Do you know how to do that?
Yes.
I will try and figure that out. Please don't let me interrupt the conversation. I think Stan was on the verge of saying something when I hogged the microphone.
Not necessarily.
I can actually extend, I can forward your email address to Dr. Park, actually, Randy.
Okay.
I have Dr. Park's email, so yes. And
Very good.
I don't want to interrupt. Well, our discussion never really gets boring, but why don't we take 10 minutes break and be back at after 10 minutes and continue our talk.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
So please don't quit the meeting. See you after 10 minutes. Yes, I'll give the floor to the moderator, Randy.
In due consideration of the fact it's 2:30 in the morning in Belgium and in Amsterdam, I think we should be succinct. We should be polite. We're harming our colleagues. So what if we were in summation? Let's be clear. Is there something that we should say for this year's forum? Should we add? Would you like to have the last word? Are you still awake?
Oh, our apologies.
It may
No
not.
worries. No worries. I'm awake.
You are awake, aren't you? You're remarkable. Yeah.
No,
Would
no,
you
no.
like to conclude with a certain direction or a certain thought, or just
Already?
simply good night?
Because
Oh, already. Never mind. Never mind.
No, I was thinking what would be on my wish list for the project to do in the coming 1 or 2 years before we really start working on the book and the exhibition and so on. Okay, so the most remarkable thing of our Washington conference was that Uwe Minal showed that impressing different kinds of type cast by Stan without ink on dry paper gave different research results. So the dry paper picked up some metal of the type, and the results were different per kind of type. It means that the Stanford machine is highly sensitive because with normal XRF you wouldn't notice that. So that is a very useful tool. On the other hand, if other laboratories would like to reproduce the results, there are very few synchrotron accelerators available for this kind of work. So you mentioned moving a volume from Korea to Stanford just because there's only one machine there in Stanford, instead of using an XRF in Korea. That would not produce the result we were looking for. So that is a weak point, and that would be a point on my wish list, finding ways to get usable results of technical examination by using local equipment.
Well, could we pause there? Jennifer, are you on the line?
Yeah, I was just gonna pop in and say some of the finer details of what's been observed at the synchrotron are not visible with a standard XRF, but some of them are. It's just that it takes so much long. So you can have an XRF instrument that can only do one point at a time, but actually there are portable ones that can map an area that are now fairly widely available and not particularly hard to come across and can be rented, for example. The disadvantage of them compared to the synchrotron is that it takes so much longer to get equivalent data. So it would take what the synchrotron can do in an hour, a portable scanning instrument would take probably 2 or 3 days to accomplish. So for a one-off, and the other thing that you get that's beneficial by being able to scan a larger area, like at the synchrotron, is that you sort of have the backing of statistics behind you. If you do a scan of one small area, it's easy for a pessimist to say, or a cynic maybe, to say that, oh, that's a fluke, you know, what you see. Whereas when you can see entire sentences that are showing the same trend that you expect on multiple pages from the same book, on multiple books across time, that you can do in 2 weeks in the synchrotron, that would be probably years of a researcher's life. But now, you know, once that's been proven via the synchrotron, then it's, I think, going to be much more acceptable for people in individual smaller institutions to scan only a small region and then use that as proof. The other thing is that right now, a lot of this is being done at the synchrotron in Stanford, but there are other scanning synchrotrons with XRF scanning capabilities worldwide. The synchrotron in Korea does not happen to be one of them, although that is something they could set up if they were interested in. It would just take some time and money and a lot of effort.
Great. Great.
So,
can I ask Bill
in France and so on?
Jennifer, could I just ask, given that the gross question, is it metal type or is it woodblock, is the pressing question for this one particular book, would the portable XRF be an adequate tool to be able to define that, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down on that one question? Maybe not as specific how much metals and which metals are present, but what we found at the synchrotron was that a woodblock simply didn't have metals in the print where, you know, the books printed from metal type did. So that was a pretty off and on, you know, yes, no kind of result. Do you think it would be feasible? Because, and the reason I'm suggesting it, because I do believe that the synchrotron is a fabulous tool, and I think it'd be great to fold this into the other work that we've done. But barring, you know, the difficulty of bringing a book across the border and all the way to California and back again, it certainly would be hand transported and maybe would have great difficulty leaving the country. I don't know. So I just wonder, to answer the simple question that has been posed, is it an earlier example of a metal type printing? Do you think there's a simple way to do that with a lower quality tool?
I would bring this up with the scientists at the National Museum of Korea. They have a scanning XRF in their labs, as well as they probably have access to any number of metal type printed books that they could use as proof of concept. They certainly have one of the best collections of movable metal type in Korea. And I know they've been doing a lot of work studying the movable metal type itself. I don't know how much they've done on the printed books, but I'm in contact with a number of scientists there. So if this is something that people would like to pursue, it's something we could probably ask them.
Thank you. That's a wonderful answer. Very international of you. Thank you.
Randy, I liked I'm not quite sure it was the question you asked, but his reply was, well, my wish list would be, and I think that's a good concluding question for everyone here, is this moment in time, what's your wish list? My wish list is that we get to go to Paris and see this bloody thing and touch it and handle it with the conservators there, and take an assortment of photographs that will allow us to study it. You know, I mean, that's my wish list. We get to go there and see it.
That's wonderful. Great. Ad, I cut you off earlier, but I'm going to register Tim's wish list. It's coming on Christmas time, so I'm collecting wishes. What would your further wishes be?
To have more time.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, starting January 1st, I will have a 2-year stipend, 2-year fellowship for writing the manuscript of a book on early European color printing, and it will mean working 7 days per week for 2 years in the hope to finish it within 2 years. So I will have very little time for other projects. But the good news is that part of the book will be on antecedents of European woodblock printing, which means going back to Asian sources. And that coincides quite nicely with part of the Jikji project.
And
So
would that include the Tarsh, that whole genre of?
Yes, please.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah. Of course.
As long as we don't lose your heart, I don't care.
And I'm also building up contacts very, very slowly with people in India, researchers in India, because if my guesses are right, if I read the literature properly, then it seems, and I expressed this before, that there is a continuous development of woodblock printing from, say, about 400 BCE in northwest India, moving eastward, and later on moving westward. So if I can find any more solid evidence on that, it will be extremely helpful for our knowledge of also Korean printing, because it comes from someplace. It did not develop in China. It did not develop in Japan or Korea. It came from further westward. And
What's further west of Korea?
Say again, please.
What's further west of Korea?
India.
Oh, west. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we talk about trade routes from India through Tibet into China, into Korea, into Japan, into Cambodia.
That's very exciting. Huge.
Never thought of that. Yeah.
I know it's quite ambitious because the literature is very scarce, and there are very few people knowledgeable in this area.
But there is physical evidence, it's like that's the touchstone, hopefully, is there to be something, even if it's minimal.
I hope to see some photographs of the very earliest of this, say, Northwest Indian printing or stamping, I should say. We have things that, you could call seals, of course, from Mesopotamia, and there is something Mid-American. There is something from the Caucasus. There is something from Çatalhöyük in Turkey about 8 millennia ago. But we need to look for a continuous development, and that's more difficult if you have only haphazard finds.
Clearly, there's more to learn, and I think we're all interested. So we wish you the best of luck.
I'll share if there's something that needs to be shared.
If we can help,
I'll let know.
Good.
Yeah.
Who else wants a last word? And we'll call it good.
I just have a quick question. The machine that you talked about being in Stanford, is that synchrotron circular particle accelerator machine?
Yes.
I just Googled it and came up
Yes.
with the machine.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's an extremely rare commodity, but it's shared for science So we've made application. That's the process. We had approval for 2 years and we used it up. So we've reapplied and expect to be approved. Uwe Bergman, a member of our team, is a regular at that machine, and his student Minhal is conducting her PhD doing this particular research project. So it's accessible to us through their good graces, and so it's an opportunity. But as we discussed with Jennifer, there may be a way through the National Museum in Korea to actually just get the simple answer, yes or no, there was metal type involved or there was not. That I think we have sufficient information today to actually understand that what the protocol would be to test for that with the book. And so it wouldn't have to come to America. We would love for it to. We would love for it to be in our, one way or another. I would love that. But if it's too complicated, there will probably be another way, and we'll talk about that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I love that we have questions, and I love that all of you are inquisitive. I think that's phenomenal, so I want to thank you all, especially the presenters. You've done a beautiful job. Each of your talks is a real keeper. It's world class and will help advance what people know. They're beautiful, succinct, and entertaining presentations. And if I could, I'd like to thank ICDH for putting on the forum this year and for supporting us in this work and helping to further our ability to understand this global concept of early printing and how we're all involved, how everyone on the planet has been impacted by the forward motion of human inquisitiveness and human creativity. And so with that, I'll say thanks.
Thank you, Randy,
Thank you.
for moderating today's discussion. And let's give a round of applause for our two interpreters, Bora Lee and Suhyun Park. They've done an amazing job translating Korean to English and English to Korean. And so over the past 2 hours, we explored the theme of Western bibliography today. Starting our conversation with UNESCO Memory of the World inscriptions, the Gutenberg Bible, and Jikji. What commenced as a focused examination of type printing and book printing history expanded into comprehensive discussion in compressing broader historical and cultural aspects like technological parts of paper making, inks, and more. As co-principal investigator institution and host of the discussion, UNESCO ICDH sincerely thank each one of you for joining today or tonight, depending on your time zone. And your active participation has added depths to our collaborative understanding of interests that shape our global intellectual heritage. And looking ahead, UNESCO ICDH remains committed to supporting meaningful activities that celebrates and preserves the record and memories shaping our world. And we anticipate continuing in our journey together in the pursuit of knowledge and shared understanding. And thank you so much again, everybody. And we hope to see you again very soon through either online or offline conference or meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.